Today we're going to take a look at another food delivery service. This one's a bit different than the ones we've looked at up to this point. It's called Home Chef. Instead of a like pre-cooked, pre-prepared, sometimes frozen, sometimes never frozen, microwavable meal, these are more along a meal that has been prepped and pre-portioned for you. It makes it much easier for you to combine the ingredients, cook them for the right amount of time, and have a nice, delicious meal for you, one, two, however many people. Home Chef is much more of a HelloFresh Blue Apron style of service where they send you the raw ingredients. Now, the difference between Home Chef is they offer, express, oven ready, just straight meal plans where it's just the ingredients, etc. We tried the oven ready and the oven ready plus meals. Now, these meals come with all the ingredients, spices, seasonings, etc., already portioned and prepped for you. One of the meals had zucchini. All the zucchini and onions were chopped up in a bag, ready for us just to dump in the pan, throw on the seasonings, and boom, there we go. What caught my attention was the fact that most of the ingredients for pretty much all of the meals, when you go the oven ready route, come pre-portioned, prepped, and ready to go. Now, I won't lie, some are a bit more laborious than others, a bit more time intensive, but overall, it was pretty exciting. I was happy to give this a try. I've always wanted something that was similar to this, and I was curious if this really met my expectations. Because ideally, I don't care about coming home, putting some ingredients in a pan, preheating an oven, throwing in the oven, 25, 30 minutes later, you have a cooked meal. But their oven ready meals are definitely what caught my attention and definitely what got me excited to try Home Chef. Each meal includes enough food for 2 servings or 2 people in their eyes, in my opinion. You gotta be pretty light eaters for 2 people to eat a lot of this. Now, you can choose plans with more servings per meal and more meals per week. It really allows you to customize in a lot of ways that other services just don't. You're also able to mix and match the meals. Sadly, it turns out that a lot of the meals were a bit more work than we were looking for. I'd really hope that it was, hey, here's a bag of this that's chopped up. Here's a bag of that that's chopped up. We're giving you a pan, throw a little bit of salt and vinegar, whatever, oil, pepper, whatever, slide it in the oven, boom, there you go. But with some of the meals, you do have to have like a mixing bowl, saucepans, etc. One of the meals had salmon, you have to sear the salmon. One of the meals have sirloin, you have to sear the sirloin. Everything else is pretty much able to just be kind of put either at the same time or at different times in the pan, thrown in the oven, and you're good to go. But as I mentioned earlier, they do offer the ability to mix and match meals and mix and match the type of meal, whether it's the oven ready plus, the express, the meal kit. I think they have a few other options as well I didn't look into, but most of those are going to be more work than we're looking to do. And sadly, even some of the oven ready meals were a bit more work than I had expected. Where in my mind, I'm thinking maybe 10 minutes to throw it together. While I'm throwing it together, the stove can preheat. Once it's preheated, we can just slide it in there, another 20, another 30 minutes, just go about my day, boom, it's done. That definitely wasn't the case for most meals we tried. It took about 25 minutes to get everything together, get online, get the recipe card, make sure everything is prepped and ready to go, to get this and that seasoned, to get this preheated, start getting this cooked. So overall, from start to the food being finished and on your plate, we're talking anywhere from about 45 minutes to an hour, hour and a half, depending on what it was, because certain things, like the turkey, for example, was much more difficult to work with than the ground pork. So it took much longer to make the ground turkey meatballs than it did the pork meatloafs. It's because the pork meatloaf was much firmer, so it was a lot easier for you to get in your hand, mix, mash together, form, etc. Whereas the turkey was much more like loose and mushy and kind of sticky, and you'd go to ball it, half of it stuck on your hands. So there were a few issues with some of the meals that made them a bit more of a pain in the ass than others, we'll say. 2 issues I noticed, and I mentioned one previously. The recipe cards were not included with the meals. Your food came in a large box, which I'll show you here in a little bit later, in the bag that they came in. They came in a box. The individual bags had like the ingredients, the vegetables, the sides, etc. for the meals. And then there was one large bag that had all the meats thrown inside of it. So without the recipe cards, you're kind of just like, there's no, oh, this is this is that. So other than, okay, that's a zucchini and that says it's ground pork, it can be a little bit time consuming and a bit of a pain in the ass. Instead of just having all the ingredients and the recipe in the same bag, we don't have the recipe. We have half the ingredients in one bag, the meat in the other bag. So it can make it a bit confusing, especially if you're new to things. It wasn't that big of a deal, especially once you go on, open up the recipes, look at it, and you can start to mix and match what's what. The second issue is something that pretty much anybody in the food service industry suffers from. The second issue I noticed, and this is something that any and everybody in the food service industry has a problem with, is the portions and the food itself was much smaller when you ordered it, when you cooked it, when you were eating it, than anything you saw with the images when you ordered the food and the images attached to the recipe card. So that's a bit of a bummer when you think like, oh, this has got 2 sirloins and one of the sirloins is that big around. It's kind of not as fun and exciting. You know, you don't want to invite a chick over for your first date. Oh, I'm cooking us some sirloin, and she comes over and you hand her a sirloin the size of a pencil eraser. For example, the pictures of the meatball gyros, they all had about 14 to 16 meatballs in them. When in actuality, we got the oven ready meal kit and there were only 8 meatballs. It's such a kick in the nuts. I thought maybe they even forgot to include all the meatballs. Like I said earlier, it's just enough of a pain in the ass for them not to have the recipe cards in there, and for you to have to go on the site, go to your order history, pick each individual meal, match up the ingredients. I just feel like it would be a lot easier. Slide the recipe card in the bag, put the meat in the bag, maybe put the meat in another bag before you put it in with the other ingredients, so it's, you know, less of a chance of cross contamination. But I just feel like shipping wise, they could do a little better. Each meal was about 20 to 30 minutes of prep time, putting everything together, getting the oven preheated, and it was probably an additional 20 to 30 minutes of cook time as well. So like I said earlier, it was right about an hour, sometimes a little bit more depending on what meal we were cooking, before you were able actually to start, sit down, and start eating. Luckily, a lot of the recipes all call for the oven to be at 425 degrees, so a couple of days I actually took the risk and made 2 of these meals at once, so I could have one for earlier in the day, and then kind of pick at one throughout the rest of the day. But you know me, we're not paying full price, and this time we were able to take advantage of I believe it was 18 free meals from Home Chef. Now, of course, they spread this out over, I want to say 3 to 4 orders. But before the discount, our order was $147.86 with $11 in shipping. And we were able to save right around $45 with this discount code. I'm sure it's still available and active, especially around the holiday season. Yeah, we were able to save about $45 on our order, bringing the total down, including shipping, to $113.85. For the discounts, each meal ranges at about $8 per serving, all the way up to $13 per serving, with 2 servings for each meal. So some meals were all the way up at, you know, $15, others were all the way up at $30 on the high end, which is fairly expensive in my opinion, and even with the discount, it's a bit hard to swallow. Here's the box that comes in. As you can see, it's in pretty good shape overall. This is probably in the best shape of any of the boxes we've received in the mail. Take a look inside. Very similar packaging, a few cardboard dividers, nothing too crazy. Now we're gonna do something I wish somebody would have done so I could have seen what we're about to take a look at. These are the meals. As you can see, everything's in one bag. You pull it out, we have our little pan right here. We've got a little bit of garlic and herb cheese spread, some panko breadcrumbs, some garlic salt, 2 different types of cheese, bacon, tomatoes, and pre-portioned, pre-cut, pre-prepped zucchini. Now the pan, as you can see, took a little bit of a beating, but nothing too bad. Just give it a little crank, put the lip down, you should be good. And then finally, this is the bag the chicken came in. We have the chicken breast that comes in a small packaging like this, and with the other meats is off separate from the ingredients we just shown. You can't really see the zucchini, but you can see at least that they are sliced. I have to say the tomatoes are a bit higher quality than I expected. That's something I wish that somebody would have been able to do for me. I wish I could have taken advantage of the ability to see what the actual item I would receive was going to be. I have to say, from what I just showed you, that is what I was expecting when I purchased the item. I was hoping, like I said earlier, that there wouldn't be so much, okay, and you need a pan and you need a mixing bowl. I was hoping it would be a lot more like, all right, just put the zucchini down, push them to one side, drop your tomatoes in, put the seasoning on, throw in your chicken, and let's go. Sadly, not very many of the meals were like that. We ordered 6 meals, each with 2 servings. We've cooked, prepared, and had 5 of them. The one we just looked at was the cheddar crusted chicken. We've yet to try that one yet. I wanted to make sure and save one so I could show you guys just essentially what you'll receive. In my opinion, I wish they would kind of, possibly put the chicken in something like this and then include it in the bag with the recipe card. But unfortunately, I would assume maybe for help, again, food safety issues, maybe that's why they try to keep the meat separate and together, separate from the meals and together with all raw products. All right, now we're going to take a look at some of the meals that we prepared. The first one is one of the oven ready plus meals. It was the sesame crusted salmon with black garlic potatoes. This is the first time in this series of reviews where we're talking about fish, and it's not microwave fish. So I hope at least some of you all are a little proud of me about that. We're progressing. This is your typical salmon fillet, nothing too crazy, nothing too wild. Just like with any salmon fillet with skin on it, you always got to sear that skin nice and good. I want to say you cook it like, 80-90% of the time you cook it on the skin to get that skin all nice and crispy. And then what you do is you have the potatoes, you put them in the pan, you season them up a little bit, you push them over to one side, and then you put the salmon skin side up in the oven for about 25 minutes. Sadly, I overcooked the skin just a smidge, but it wasn't enough to cause any issues with the meal itself, but just cosmetically didn't make it look as pretty as it could be. Overall, the meal was pretty delicious, and the potatoes were much better than they looked when I was preparing them. I ended up, drowning them with ketchup, but what's a potato for than to eat ketchup? Next, we're going to look at the Oven Ready Plus sirloin and roasted garlic butter with buttermilk, mashed potatoes, and green beans. Sadly, not a single meal that had the green beans in it had them turn out worth a damn, in my opinion. Either the protein was overcooked and the green beans were undercooked, or vice versa. It was just really hard to get those green beans to come out properly in the oven. I don't know if it was a quality issue or what exactly it is, but a lot of the green beans in multiple meals, they still had the stems, they still had the fucking strings on them. So like I'm literally here having to like break off stems and stuff as I'm trying to prep this stuff. So that was a bit like meh. The mashed potatoes looked wet. The mashed potatoes looked like a wet and mushy mess. They looked like they were going to be awful. They had like pools of water in the container with them. But I have to say, after they were in the oven for a while, you mix a little cream cheese they give you in there with them, and the mashed potatoes were actually the best part of the entire dish. The sirloins were good. They were surprisingly tender for sirloins, because sirloin, it can be on the fence. It's either going to be like, oh, this is surprisingly tender, or your jaw is going to give out from chewing it. There's no in between. Both sirloins were small. One was substantially smaller than the other. As I mentioned, it was about the size of a small fillet. The other one was, maybe about yay long, yay wide, much more of an acceptable steak, we'll say. But much like the salmon fillets, you need to bust out a saucepan with a little bit of olive oil, etc. Get it over like medium heat. Throw the steaks on for like a minute or so on each side just to get a nice sear on them, and then just finish them off in the oven with the mashed potatoes. I will say this meal was one of the quicker ones to throw together and get in and out, and it also gave us some of the best results as well. Now we're going to look at the oven ready family meal, the beef meatball gyros with tzatziki sauce. I love gyros and pretty much any and every Greek food I have ever tried. I am a massive fan myself. I mean, hell, who doesn't like tzatziki sauce? It's like the Mediterranean / Middle Eastern version of Hidden Valley Ranch. And I mean, be truthful, be honest with yourself. You love that shit. Sadly, the beef meatballs came pre-cooked and pre-prepared. It made the meal much quicker to throw together. But in the images, as I mentioned earlier, this meal in particular had like 14 to 16 meatballs shown, when in actuality you get 8. So for a gentleman like me, it was a bit of a kick in the nuts. I forget the name of the brand, but it came with 8 little non-bread like pitas that were absolutely fantastic. They recommend you throw them in the oven. I just popped them, one at a time in the microwave for like 20, 30 seconds. Nice, hot, soft. Coat it in tzatziki sauce. Get a little bit of the peppers, a little bit of the onions. Get 2 meatballs, cut them in half, lay them across. Boom, bada bing, bada bang. There you go. But to me, the tzatziki sauce and the naan bread made this dish. Without either of those, I just don't think we're reaching the heights that this was able to reach. Oddly enough, the tzatziki was like the hardest part of the meal to make, like mixing it together with sour cream, etc. It was a lot easier just to pop open the peppers, pop open the onions, throw it down, dump the meatballs on it, put a little seasoning, throw it in the oven. Meanwhile I'm over here like, mixing and squirting and mix. So like, just get the peppers, you get the onions, you throw them in there, you put the meatballs, a little bit of seasoning, etc. You put it in there for, well, I think it was like 425 for 25 minutes. And I have to say, overall, I was very impressed with the meal as a whole. It wasn't the best one, but I haven't had Greek food in just long enough to where this really hit the spot. But again, I can't stress how good the naan bread was in this recipe. And now we're going to talk about another meal, the bacon and cheese pork meatloaf with panko parmesan zucchini. The meatloaves took a lot more work than some of the other meals and recipes we've looked at so far, but it turned out pretty well. The pork was nice and firm, so getting your hands in there and mixing it with the ingredients in the mixing bowl, etc., and like forming the meatloaves, molding the meatloaves out, was much easier than it was with like the turkey we're going to be talking about here soon. But yeah, luckily we were able to get everything thrown together, get the meatloaves made, get it all thrown in the pan. With the zucchini and onions, you just threw those out in the pan, put some seasoning here or there, a little bit of Parmesan, pushed it over to the side, coated it with the panko to give it a nice crust, threw the Parmesan on top of that. Then you just put the 2 little meatloafs in that bad boy. And then again, I think it was 425 for about 25 or 30 minutes. I cooked this one a little bit longer, but unfortunately the zucchini still didn't get cooked all the way through. It was good, and flavor wise it was nice and crisp, but it just wasn't where it needed to be. Finally, we're on our last meal, the pesto turkey meatballs with roasted garlic green beans. As I mentioned before, the green beans are just a miss when it comes to Home Chef. I can't really put my finger on it why. I don't know if it's an issue with the quality of the ingredients themselves. I don't know if it's an issue with the recipe itself. I'm not really for sure. But at no point in time did any of the green beans come out as I would like them to. And all of the green beans had stems, strings, etc. on them. Every meal that had green beans had multiple green beans that still had stems on them. These meatballs were a hell of a handful to make. The ground turkey was nowhere near as firm as the pork, so getting the turkey combined with the ingredients and then molded into 6 little balls was no easy task. Like I said, it's just impossible to get these green beans to turn out how you'd want them to. Like I said earlier, the turkey wasn't very firm. It was really mushy and sticky, so as you tried to like roll it around in your hand and form the meatballs, half of it would stick to your hand. It was a bit of a mess, to be honest. I would really have preferred if the turkey itself was a bit firmer and thicker, similar to the pork we mentioned previously, than what we had to deal with. I want to say this one cooked for a total of about 40 minutes. This one started off different from the others in that you put the green beans in there, cooked them for 15 minutes at 425, and then you pulled them out, added the meatballs, and cooked them for another 25 to 30 minutes. Overall, it was about a 40-minute process from start to finish. I have to say, though, the turkey meatballs turned out very firm and fairly flavorful. I wasn't the biggest fan of the pesto sauce that came with it, so I happened to put a little bit of ketchup on them. They were good without it, but they were even better with it. But I appreciate you guys stopping by. I'm gonna have to stop and take a look at what we're gonna do next. Home Chef offers a similar product to Factor and things like that, like a 2-minute microwavable meal. I might look into that. There's another one I want to say from Home Chef called Tempo. That's along the lines of Factor as well. So we'll probably look into Tempo, maybe try it. There's a few other ones that kind of like catch my eyes, but by the time this video comes out, we'll be way past the holiday season, so it's not so easy to find these 50% off, etc., etc. But we're gonna keep our eye out for a deal. If any of you guys see anything, please let me know. I'm always down to save money on some food and try something new. So I'm gonna apologize. I've had a bit of a throat issue recording this video. I've tried to cut out all the coughing, etc. So if my voice is a little weird or sounds a little weaker, I'm not sick. I just happen to be in a situation with a lot of hooping and a lot of hollering the day previously. So just got a little bit of an irritation here. So I appreciate you guys kind of bearing with me. Thank you all for stopping by, and we'll see you next time.